Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 34 of Untold Evidence. At 4 in the morning on the 20th of September 1977, in a Soviet city called Petrozavodsk, the sky did something very unusual. A bright object appears low over the horizon. It was described by hundreds of witnesses as resembling a jellyfish. It hung around the sky for around 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, thin beams of light extended downward from the object. Witnesses described the beams as falling like rain. 2 days later, on the 22nd of September, the official Soviet newspaper Pravda published a short article confirming the event had occurred. It was the first time in modern Soviet history that an unexplained aerial phenomenon had been publicly acknowledged by the state press. After that article, silence. For 6 years, the Soviet Union said nothing further about Petrozavodsk. The city of Petrozavodsk sits on the western shore of Lake Onega, in what was then the Soviet Union, now part of the Russian Republic of Karelia. It's a port city, industrial, cold, and in September 1977, it had the population of around 200,000 people. In the early morning of the 20th of September, dock workers, dairy workers, meteorologists, and ordinary citizens all reported the same thing. A glowing object, approximately the size of a star, but considerably larger and lower than any normal star, appeared low in the sky. According to multiple later reports, including a 1991 New York Times article that revisited the case, approximately 23 separate witnesses' reports were officially logged. Eyewitnesses said the object was the colour of, in the words of one witness, molten metal. The shape was consistently described as a jellyfish, a central glowing body with thin tentacle-like beams of light reaching downward. So what sets the Petrozavodsk case apart from a routine UFO sighting is what witnesses reported the object actually doing. The downward falling beams of light reportedly produced visible damage in the buildings within the city. Specifically, a number of windows in the upper floor flats were reported to have small, perfectly round holes punched through the glass. The holes were not cracked, they did not produce shattering. The glass around the holes was reportedly intact. A separate property, the holes were funnel-shaped. The hole on the inner pane of the window was wider than the hole on the outer pane of the window, as if the object had struck the glass from the outside. These reports were investigated by Yuri Platov, a Soviet astronomer who served on a state UFO investigation panel. Platov's later assessment, published in the post-Soviet Union era, was skeptical. We'll return to that in one moment. The Pravda article of the 22nd of September 1977 was, by the standards of Soviet Union journalism, remarkable. Soviet state media did not, as a general rule, acknowledge unexplained phenomena. The article was brief. It said it had unusual celestial phenomenon had been observed over the city of Petrozavodsk. It described the object in the same terms witnesses had used, resembling a jellyfish. It had noted that the cause was, at the time of writing, unknown. After Pravda, regional Soviet newspapers also covered the story for several days, and then the coverage stopped. For 6 years, the Petrozavodsk phenomena was official Soviet discourse, a non-event. It was only in 1983, after the Soviet Academy of Sciences formed a committee to study what they then called anomalous atmospheric phenomena, that the case was re-examined publicly. By that time, most of the original physical evidence, including the broken windows, was no longer available for first-hand inspection. In the late Soviet and early post-Soviet period, an official explanation emerged. The Petrozavodsk phenomenon, according to Soviet astronomical authorities, was caused by the launch of a satellite from the Pletsk cosmodrome, approximately 390 kilometers to the east. Specifically, the launch of Cosmos 955 reconnaissance satellite in the early hours of the 20th of September 1977. The argument was that the exhaust gases from the rocket's upper stage interacted with the upper atmosphere, producing the visible plume that witnesses described as a jellyfish. The so-called tentacles of light, according to this account, were ionized gas trails caught in the upper atmosphere winds. This is, for what it's worth, a known phenomenon. Modern rocket launches do produce visible plumes of exactly this, visible from very long distances at dawn or dusk. Now, the case for the rocket explanation. Yuri Platov and other Soviet scientists have argued in published work that the morphology of the object, the jellyfish shape, the elevation, the duration, and the absence of measurable radar signatures all match a high-altitude rocket exhaust event. The timing also fits. The Cosmo 955 launch is documented in publicly available Soviet space program records. For the rocket explanation to be wrong, one would have to argue that the two unusual high-altitude phenomena occurred Karelia in the same hour. The harder question is the punctured windows. Skeptics have proposed that the window damage was either pre-existing damage attributed to the event after the fact, or the result of a separate, unrelated mechanical cause. Perhaps small projectiles, perhaps temperature stress on the glass. It seems potentially possible. Whether those proposed explanations are sufficient is, in the absence of preserved physical samples, not a question that science can definitively answer. So here is where the Petrovsk phenomenon actually sits. There is good evidence that the visible light shown in the sky was the high-altitude exhaust plume of a Soviet reconnaissance satellite launch. There is no equally good evidence for what happened to the window. There's also a structural detail that does not get easily dismissed. A Soviet state newspaper in 1977 published an article confirming an unexplained event, and then the Soviet Union government for 6 years said nothing further. If this cause was simply a routine satellite launch, the question is, why did Pravda not say so? Why allow the population to believe for years that something inexplicable had occurred, when a routine technical explanation, in principle, available to satellite authorities, was available? The most obvious answer is the classified satellite launches were classified. For whatever reason, the Soviet state could not officially confirm that the visible phenomena over the city was a Cosmos military reconnaissance launch, without acknowledging the launch itself. Herein lies the plethora of issues with disclosure. Sometimes secrecy creates UFO incidents, not aliens, not foreign craft, just routine government secrecy producing accidental mystery. But that explanation, while plausible, still leaves us with a documented Soviet acknowledgement of an unexplained aerial event, in a state that did not, as a general rule, acknowledge such things. And it does not explain the windows. Names matter, records matter. If you found this episode useful, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.